Hi, welcome back to the Sticky Floor podcast. As usual, I'm with Callum
Hello.
and Daniel.
Yes.
um, this week we'll be discussing the 1954 films Belles of St Trinain, based on the Ronald Sear cartoons and directed by Frank Launder. Before we jump into that, we're going to discuss what we've been watching this week. So Callum, what have you been watching this week?
Okay, this week I watched, apart from the film we're going to discuss, obviously, I watched a British comedy drama from 2001 called The Martins, starring Kathy Burke and Lee Evans. It was, like I said, a comedy drama, and it didn't do either particularly well. The other film I watched was another British film, a much more recent one, called Catch Me Daddy. The film was very intense and very well made. But it ended somewhat abruptly. But it's kind of a major spoiler there in such a brief review. But that's what I watched this week.
Fantastic, Daniel.
I watched I discovered one of my new favourite films ever, The Man Who Knew Too Little. Have any of you seen that?
What's his name? Steve Martin?
No, Big Bill Murray stars in it.
Okay.
And the
What
plot
was I
of
thinking
it
of with Steve Martin?
I don't know, like Austin Powers. I don't know.
No, that's not Steve Martin.
All right, whatever. The plot is basically Bill Murray's character is like an American tourist, and he comes to England and he gets himself involved in like a spy thriller accidentally, and he has no idea what's going on the entire time.
Oh yeah, I know the one you mean. The one where he's like, it's like a kind of role play game, but he thinks everybody's role playing, but it's all actually real.
Yeah. So he thinks he's in like a live theatre performance, but actually he's like got caught up in a big espionage thriller. But I had like a smile through the entire film. It's fucking amazing. Sam, did you watch it?
On the tone of I believe it was last week what we watched, I decided to rewatch This Is England, the film.
Okay.
And then I'd never seen the TV series before, so I decided to give that a watch. And I binged all 3 seasons of it in like
Really?
a day. Yeah.
In a day?
Yeah, in like a day. I'm spiraling here. It's lockdown. But so I thought they were phenomenal. I really enjoyed the series. I think possibly more so than the film, just because we get to delve into the characters more and like really learn like who they are as people and see them develop over the course of the years. So yeah, that's what I watched this week.
I've
The
never
TV
seen
minis. I will watch them. They're brilliant. Of the
Yeah.
TV miniseries, Simon, which one was your favourite?
Probably
86, 88 or 90?
86 or 88. I liked 88's kind of like darker tone and kind of like compressed story, and I really appreciated how they did that. But 86 is a kind of like balance between all the tones. I think was executed well. 90 was like, I still really enjoyed it, but I found certain elements more grating. And it was just it was still good, but like it's definitely my least favorite out of the series.
I would agree completely with that.
Yeah,
I've not seen any This Is England. I really wanted
you
to.
should watch them. You'd really enjoy them.
Yep, they're my cup of tea, those type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Joe Gilgan is absolutely fantastic in them, as is the rest of the cast, but he always stands out to me because of the amount of stuff I've just watched from him over the course of the years. Yeah, totally just
Emmerdale.
brilliant, including Emmerdale. So let's jump into the film then. Callum, first thoughts.
It took me a wee while to get into it. Initially, I thought, oh, it's okay, but it's kind of very of its time and its tone and its style, and it's very cartoony. But as it kind of got into it, especially as things started to ramp up with the horse plot line, I started to enjoy it a lot more. I liked how madcap it was, and I just like how it had a real sense of fun about it. Looked like it was a lot of fun to make.
Cool.
Not
Daniel?
for the horse. When I watched this, as both of you are aware, I was in a fucking terrible mood. So I hated it like with a passion.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's 2 counts of blackface in this film. I'm not sure.
Only one.
Only one.
Oh, one.
One.
Voted,
Yeah.
because
I do want to discuss that. That's one of my notes.
And just in terms of the comedy, I've watched Kind Hearts and Coronets, that English film, I think it's the 40s it was made, which is previous to this, and it's so much like more dense and it's just all around a better and funnier film. So no excuses for this being like fucking shite as it is, because I thought maybe this was the time limit, that's why it's shite, but no, it's just like a terrible film. Also, the horse, we'll get into the horse. Okay,
we'll get into
Simon,
the horse later. Okay, well,
what was the film you compared it to, Daniel? Sorry, Simon.
Kind
Hearts and Coronets.
Don't know that one, so I've got no frame of reference.
Really good.
No, neither. The St Trinian, the original St Trinian films, I was like, them and the Carry On films are like basically very prominent pieces of media in my childhood. I was kind of raised on them, so I've a kind of, this is partly nostalgia and also me wanting to look back and see how I like perceive them and consume them with like my 19-year-old brain now. I still have a lot of love for it, but obviously with like the context I have now, there's things that I wanted to talk about, such as the race implications with how Middle Eastern people are represented throughout the film. But I also want to discuss the early use of drag and how that comes into the gender conversation throughout the film. If we look at this through a kind of gender critical lens, it's actually a really interesting piece. Just because of all the different varying degrees of how women are represented, and how it can go from a mocking way with the female police officer to a kind of like more respected gaze, I guess, with other female characters. So I wanted to discuss that. Yeah, it's still, I think it's a really interesting film in terms of like cultural point, like a cultural viewpoint, just because it's the 50s. So, and I know I didn't say anything about the modern adaptations, but in my knowledge, when comparing them,
No, I haven't actually seen them. I was saying the less said, the better. I haven't actually seen them, but
the modern adaptations are still really entertaining, but I think they do miss the mark on certain points, especially the second one. Rupert Everett's portrayal of the headmistress is like stellar, but everything else, it feels very much like a trying to grab for nostalgia. I didn't tell you guys to watch them, obviously, but it's just an interesting thing for me to look back on. So yeah, also casting Russell Brand in the modern adaptations of for Flash Harry was an interesting casting decision, to say the least. So yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about how Middle Eastern people are represented in this film and the casual use of brown face. I had to double check that the actress was white, because I was like, that, yeah, I was like, that's definitely like, but I just wanted to double check. She is in fact white. She died this year, a day before my birthday, funnily enough. So,
was your birthday in March as well?
March 15th, yeah. So,
rest in peace.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, she was 79.
Yeah, so that was interesting. So how do we feel about how Middle Eastern people are represented in this 1954 film?
Go first.
Sure. I'll tell you one thing, like, I wasn't surprised, because obviously sensitivities of these types of things were much different back then, so that has to be taken into account. I mean,
I wouldn't necessarily call it sensitivities, I just call it, like, you know, a lack of cultural understanding. But
well, I mean,
sorry, I'm cutting you off.
Cool. No, it's fine. I'll tell you one thing. You see, when the character Fatima was introduced, there was a bit of an, either it was the lighting in that scene or there was just an inconsistency with how the makeup was applied between scenes. Because when the first time I saw her, I thought, she looks a bit too dark to be an Arab. And I thought, because I thought, did they cast like a South Asian girl or something? And then in the next scene, she was much lighter, and I thought, is that the same actress? And then I realised, no, it was. She's just somebody wearing makeup.
Yeah, there's just inconsistencies in the makeup.
Very interesting. You know about of the black and white minstrel show.
Mm-hmm.
Something just a wee bit of interesting trivia. They weren't actually wearing black face paint because in black and white television cameras that doesn't actually look right. So they were actually wearing red
Yeah,
face paint.
I thought it was blue because
Oh, right.
I was
You might be
doing
right.
some research into black and white makeup and like how obviously they couldn't use like the proper colors they wanted to, even with just natural makeups. There was a lot of greens and blues
Mhm.
used, cool undertones. So I thought
Ah,
maybe they'd done something like that with her, but
yeah. But to get back to
who
your point
knows?
about how Middle Eastern people, I mean, I think it's largely just a narrative. It's largely just it's just a fairly cliched plot device. They needed a character that had a very rich father, so they make him the Sultan of what I'm guessing of what a made up Middle Eastern sounding country.
Yeah,
They
can
don't.
I just
Probably.
jump
Yeah.
in, by the way? The Sultan is actually white as well. He's an Australian
Yeah.
actor.
Is it?
They're all. Yeah. I mean, it was
Yeah,
less. It was
not
less.
surprising.
I mean, to be honest, because obviously compared to white people, Middle Eastern people aren't that much darker than white people. So in black and white, it wouldn't be totally obvious. The skin tone, people of lighter skin tone, the differences between them are not so obvious when it's black and white. So, I mean, I could tell he wasn't just by. I've noticed, especially in the past, when a character is adopting a kind of foreign-sounding accent, they don't actually change their accent. They just talk in a more dramatic fashion, and then the
Yeah.
sort of rhythm of how they speak changes. But yeah, like it wasn't surprising, but it wasn't as offensive as it could have potentially been. I felt again
Mm.
that character isn't used; those characters aren't used very much throughout the film. It's really just
See,
part of it. It's just a plot device, basically.
see, when you're talking about the scale of offensiveness, to us as white people, in case the listeners don't know we're white, do you think there's
I think they
actually
can
like a
tell.
scale? Because if I was an Asian person watching this, I'd be like, well, I
I'm
can't
not
enjoy
white.
this, you know?
Kidding on listeners, I am white.
Fuck's sake.
But see, for like, if you put yourself in the shoes of an Asian person, I mean, you really just wouldn't be able to get in out of some of these older films just
Well,
because
Asian
of
people
the
weren't being
Blatant
depicted in this
racism.
film. Asian
Say
people
that
weren't
again,
being
sorry.
depicted in this film.
Is Middle Eastern not Asian?
Middle
Yeah,
Eastern
that
is
is
Middle Eastern. It's complicated.
it is complicated. Well, the Middle East is technically part of Asia, but like just the way the term
There's
Asian
a
evolved,
massive cultural difference, and there's like major, like it's a completely
it's
different context that they exist within. So
it's just a
Yeah.
it's a different like you said, it's different ethnicities, different country. Yeah, it's just the way that term is used applies to in the British context when people say Asian, they mean South Asian, and Arabs and other ethnic groups that
Sorry,
live in the
I'll
Middle
say
East
Middle
are
Eastern.
Middle Eastern.
because
Okay,
also some of the
that's
Middle
good.
East is included in Africa as well, like Egypt and stuff. That's considered to be part of the Middle East, despite
Yeah.
it being in the continent of Africa. So it kind of just it's where the kind of Arabic Islamic hub is kind of situated. So
What should I say in the future?
yeah,
Middle
just go for
Eastern?
that.
Yeah.
Or
What do you
Arabic
think,
if you're
Simon?
talking specifically, because Arabs aren't the only ethnic group, Iran being an exception.
Pardon?
I was just going to ask Simon what your thoughts on the brown face
Yeah.
is.
Well, obviously, I wasn't exactly overjoyed by it. It's interesting because I do agree with Callum. Like, it could have been a lot worse. Not to say it was good, not to say it was good by any means, but and not to give them any credit at all, because they could have either just axed that entire plot and replaced it with a kind of white rich individual, or actually cast Middle Eastern people, but they did neither. So, but in terms of like bad accents and kind of like racist stereotypes, Fatima was kind of removed from that. It was more the Sultan who he had a passing comment about letting Americans build like drone strike bases or something in his country.
Drone strike
Yeah,
bases?
or like
Are you
missile
sure?
bases or something. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that is the whole reason why she's not being educated in the Middle East, is because he's building like missile bases
All right.
and he
Okay.
wants to
Okay.
send her
It's
away.
just missile bases, fair enough. Because when you said, I don't think they had drones back then in the
You,
fifth.
you know what I mean. There's a military base he's allowing the Americans to
Yeah.
build on his land. So I was like, okay, Jesus Christ, that's just awful, frankly. And then we had the stereotype of the kind of sleazy Middle Eastern man with all this power, with his like white mistress coming through as well. That was completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
You meant to be white?
I think
I
so.
think she was dead. She was pale. She was pale as all get out.
I mean,
So there was that on top of it. It was, I mean, to be honest, it's an entire mess. It could have been handled so much better, or it could have, but it could have also been a lot worse. I understand that, but it's not for me to judge. As Daniel said, we're white. We don't understand what it's like to be perceived or go through Middle Eastern experiences in this country. That's my thoughts on that. Anyway, Daniel, what do you think?
Well, is it even necessary for this to be? I understand the horse, but you could just make this like someone who isn't Middle Eastern owns this horse.
Yeah, that's
And
yeah, basically what I was saying. Like it could have, the entire Middle Eastern kind of like concept could have been axed.
so it feels to me like they were just using that for a cheap joke, and I hate that in films. Like there was a film I watched recently. It's called Our Ladies. Seen it at the Glasgow Film Festival this year, and one of the characters has like a speech impediment and has a lisp. And the only reason he's in that movie is for like a cheap gag about how he's got a lisp and he's got like a really like severe speech impediment. So just it just fucking ruins the film. Because I actually really enjoyed like Our Ladies, and I mean maybe I would have enjoyed this a wee bit more if they didn't just have to, you know, use stereotypes and race
I
as a
mean,
cheap laugh.
I don't think they did that much, to be honest. Like, I don't want to get hung up on this point, but say if you just, like, for instance, if every Middle Eastern character in this film, and to be honest, most of them only appear in one scene, were played by Middle Eastern actors, and the film, all the lines, everything was the exact same. Would your thoughts not be like, okay, it's a wee bit stereotypical in some parts, but it's not horrible. Like, it's just kind of there. I
Uh,
mean,
no, I don't think it's horrible either. I don't think it's horrible. I think it's useless.
It's
So
definitely dated.
yeah, it's
That's the thing.
dated. Exactly.
If it was used for comedic purposes, that has been lost over time because there's nothing inherently comedic about it, at least from
yeah.
what I can see. So if
Well,
that
there was.
was for comedy, it's completely missed.
if
I
you
mean,
see,
It's not. It's
the
an
only,
odd creative decision.
I mean, I think it's just more like, in fact, you see throughout films, like throughout the kind of mid 20th century, the kind of trope of the sort of rich Arab backers or investors or something, that was quite common.
yeah, or
Especially
like
this is,
Breakfast at Tiffany's. Have you seen that with the Asian character? And
all right, no, but
That's a
I
whole
mean, it's
other
different.
bundle of sticks, man.
Yeah,
no,
yeah. I'm talking about just
It's
at the
just,
time, just
oh,
investment from wealthy Arab leaders or individuals during the kind of mid 20th century. There was just a lot of that going on, and it was just kind of during that kind of period where some of these countries were a bit more secular. And I mean, I'm going for a whole history, but my point is like, yeah, it's just it's in poor taste, and but you've got to also appreciate that, you know, attitudes and what's viewed as appropriate changes with the passage of time. So,
but that was my
yeah,
point with my original thoughts was I was linking it to like films previous to this don't fall into these tropes. So I don't think they really deserve any sort of
I'm not
get.
going to give it. I'm not going to applaud it, but like I said, it didn't ruin my enjoyment of the film. Like I thought, oh, right, wasn't too surprised that they went that this is how they handled it because of the time it came out. But interesting thing about the character of Fatima, I thought she was going to be silent throughout the entirety of it. And then at one midway point, she actually got some lines, and I couldn't actually tell if she was doing an accent or not.
Neither.
Did you?
if she
Did
was,
that?
it was a very subtle one. I think she's honestly the character of Fatima is more of a plot device and a way to juxtapose the rest of the girls at school and see how different like the influence in her life has been. I was reading an interview with the actress shortly before she died, and she was like she was the innocent one. She is inherently a plot device. She's used to kind of to juxtapose between the rest of like the chaotic energy of the other students.
Okay, I didn't really get a sense of that because she joins in with the schemes of the fourth form girls, but
Yeah,
I didn't really get
but
the
how
sense
she
that she was
acts and
supposed to
everything.
be. All right, because the thing is, she didn't really do much.
Yeah.
I never got the sense that she was meant to be juxtaposing between the other girls. Like I said, I just thought it was just all part. She was just, I suppose, the horse is the MacGuffin, but then you could say that Fatima and Fatima's money is the MacGuffin as well. It's just the thing that's there to get the plot rolling.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we've said as much as we
Anyway,
can
let's
say about
move
this.
on from that point. Yeah, how about we discuss about Alistair Sim's portrayal of the two siblings, the Crook brother and the headmistress in drag. Daniel, do you want to start off this conversation?
I guess I was a wee bit gutted to see like one of the women just portrayed as just acted by a guy. Like, what's the deal with that? Like, what do you guys think about that in general? Just the fact that this guy is playing
Drag.
So, is it supposed to be drag, or is it supposed to be for comedic effect, or why?
Well,
What
drag
is
is
the
usually
purpose?
for comedic effect. Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm cutting
drag
you
is
off.
is inherently an entertainment
Yeah,
kind of thing. It's different from
tradition.
cross dressing. Yeah,
Yeah,
traditionally it's like for entertainment or other vessels of entertainment. Um, I thought it was interesting, especially for the time. Probably what's the word? Um, the words fucking left me, but the kind of not phantasmagoria. You know what I mean? The kind of like shock value, I guess, of that comes with drag, therefore implying it's comedic, is kind of lost in time in a certain way, especially because it's not an inherently campy performance, especially compared to Rupert Everett's in the modern adaptation. The It's a lot more subtle and a lot more humane, which is interesting. If it was supposed to be comedic, that's another one of those things that's just kind of lost slightly because it is quite a subtle performance. It's quite a genuine performance, oddly enough.
do you not think sort of
So
the comedy kind of derives from the fact that it's the one actor? Is it the one actor? Because in credits it said it was brothers, and or was that a part of the joke as well? That was two
I think
people.
that's part of the joke. It's both. They were both portrayed by Alistair Sim. I wanted to discuss about the kind of scenes where they were in the same shot, which I
Okay.
found interesting for the time. But the kind of cutscene technology, I thought you can't really see any slip ups there, which was interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't
But
notice that at all.
yeah, so I think perhaps the comedy of it is supposed to stem from, like you said, like the fact it's played by the same person and
Yeah, it's the duality.
juxtaposition. Yeah, the duality and the juxtaposition between those two characters. Yeah, so I found it as interesting as an early kind of words are escaping me today. An early example of drag on film in a kind of mainstream like context. And
Yeah.
as like gender performance and everything, it was quite interesting. Especially because of how genuine the performance was as well. Especially because it's not like the character isn't like the only female or like the film isn't low in number in number of women. It's female dominated. So it's an interesting choice at that as well. What have you guys got to say on it?
Yeah, like I thought it was fine. Like it wasn't as annoying as I thought it would be. Like I said, the performance isn't as campy and as over the top as I kind of imagined it would be. So I didn't find it grating. Like I've got a very specific tolerance for like campy things don't always appeal to me. Like it's just not the kind of thing that usually I find fun. It really depends what it is. So I could probably find plenty of exceptions to that. But yeah, it didn't grate me, and I thought it was fine. Yeah, didn't matter. Enjoyed his performance. Yeah,
What was the point?
We
Like,
just
what is the actual point? And that considering, like, I know we just talked about it, but see if you were looking at something like the Birdcage, or I don't know. Even I'm so surprised to see to hear that you said about the new film as well. Also uses the drag
it's just
queens
it's
Well, it's
just a
not
from
drag
tradition.
queen. It's just
It's like
drag. Yeah, it's tradition. It's like hairspray.
it's like a panto dame. It's like
Yeah,
Widow
it's like
Twanky.
yeah, it's like hairspray as well as how both like non-musical and musical adaptations have a man playing Tracy's mother, I believe. It's tradition. I
Yeah.
mean, especially when we're talking about British entertainment as well, the idea of the dame and the kind of like, boisterous, like slightly larger woman played by a man is like kind of ingrained into like entertainment here anyway. I think there wasn't really a point behind it other than to just have it. I
I
think
mean,
it wasn't necessarily saying anything. It was just there.
wasn't traditionally in theatre, wouldn't all the parts be played by men,
Yeah,
even
and
the female
traditionally in
parts?
theatre, which is where this stems from, traditionally in theatre, women weren't allowed to on stage, so it was all men in drag. Romeo and Juliet
Right.
in
Yeah,
Shakespeare's time, it's two men. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, and
I
like
know this was a plot device in Shakespeare in Love.
yeah, every single play up to a certain point was just all men on the stage, which is where the dame archetype comes from. It comes from that point of history. So, and then it just bleeds into the fault lines of the rest of kind of entertainment. So
Traditionally, sort of. Sorry, I was going to just before cut you off. Like sort of consequently enough, in pantos, although I haven't been to a panto in years, but they don't seem to do this so much. The male lead character, like the Prince Charming character or Aladdin, would be played by a lassie.
yeah, a lot of the time, especially the one at the Tron, the male lead is often played by a woman as well, which is an interesting kind of play on things. But that's I can't remember the playwright who does the Tron pantos. I can't remember his name. He does them every year, but that's also to do with his like gender critiques and everything. So, but it's an interesting concept that play on kind of gender performance and everything, and how it's kind of bled into British entertainment as a whole. So I don't think there's a point behind it. If it's for comedic purposes, again, it's been lost. But I don't, like I said, the performance is quite genuine, so I don't feel like it would be for comedic purposes.
I mean, I suppose the idea that, well, if it's a man dressed up as a middle-aged woman, then it gives him more kind of go. It adds a certain. Well, like the panto dame character is usually over the top anyway, so it adds an extra layer of. I don't know. It's just, again, it's not something I think is that funny, but it's just, I suppose it's just the idea of a man dressed up as a woman is meant to be funny.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
isn't really funny, to be honest, unless the performance itself is outwardly funny and done with correct comedic timing. The idea of a man in dress or a man in drag is not inherently comedic, especially now.
Mrs. Brown's Boys is like the most popular thing in the world for some
Yeah, but
reason.
Mrs. Brown Boys can be funny sometimes. I'm gonna argue that.
My mind went to like Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh yeah,
I kind of like that
Which
performance a lot.
I hate that film.
Really?
It's kind of like Mr. Bean level on comfort, like discomfort for me, like that kind of like laughing at, like not the kind of laughing with, but like directly like look at this stupidity. I don't find that kind of mockery humor funny, especially when like in Mr. Bean's case he's like kind of autistic coded, which just makes it even more
I think the
uncomfortable.
idea behind Mr. Bean is it's sort of implied that he's an alien. So you have to
but
think of him
even
like an
then
alien.
it's just not funny. It makes me sad.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why Rowan Atkinson sort of retired the character, because now he's in his 60s, and I think, to be honest, still playing a kind of childlike character, which emotion, it just becomes
Men
a bit
who
fun.
act like children in like in media are just not funny at all. They're uncomfortable to watch. The man-child archetype is not entertaining, and I wish I really wish it wasn't so used so frequently.
I mean,
it's
it's
like
a
a comedic vessel.
I like Dougal and Father Ted. His
It just makes me feel sorry for them.
But do you not think, well, like I said, I like Dougal and Father Ted because like things he says are kind of surreal. And also he's kind of an endearing character. He's not malicious and he's not like, you kind of love him despite how annoying he can be.
when an element of surrealism is added into it, it becomes more tolerable because you can kind of like they exist on a different kind of plane. Whereas
Yeah.
when it's just direct mockery for how childish and immature they are, and how like you know like how unaware of normal life they are, it's just it's not for me per se.
See a film you might enjoy that is really subtle and it's that childlike character as being there. Hal Ashby made that film. Peter Sellers stars in it. It's about a gardener who makes his way to the top of the U.S. politics. And because I won't spoil any more than that, but you guys would both love that. It's a great film.
I'll have a look for it then.
One last point on the drag stuff and just like, in general, I just find it exhausting at this point. Like, it really, even in today's society, there's still a lot of like fucking stigma around it about like just transsexual, transgender.
It's not the same thing, but
and drag.
Well, it all links back to homophobia in a way and misogyny. If you look through, like, the reason why cross-dressing is inherently seen as entertaining is misogynistic and homophobic, because it's that mockery of feminine traits in someone who you like classically perceive as masculine. There is problems within it, but
isn't the whole point
it's a wider complex issue. The idea of the man in the dress, I mean,
was it not sort of like a clown thing?
Clown thing is more. Like... No, clown thing is more based on racism than misogyny. That's another ball game.
All right, I don't know where race comes into. I realised. Like,
look into the history of clowns. I did because I'm terrified of them, and it all kind of like it begins to add up and everything. That's more based in a kind of racist perspective, whereas the kind of like man in drag, man in a dress, like comedic jabbing comes from homophobia and misogyny, and then inherently transphobia.
Did you guys see?
Everything's got negative connotations now, Simon. You're making the world.
Everything is complex. Everything is complex. There's no simple way of navigating the world. It is to understand and critique media as you go. You can still consume these things, but you have to be aware of what you're consuming.
Did you guys see the Harry Styles thing? That was really recent, with how he was in a dress, and there was a big uproar about that.
Yeah, all those conservative women, because he was in a dress on the cover of Vogue. He was also the first man on the cover of Vogue USA, which I think, pretty cool.
I think he just realised that no one had done it before, so he thought I can be the first, and then so they get up in the market.
But it's interesting to see that there's still, like, because it's easy to get sucked into a vacuum and a mirror chamber of kind of like your own perspective, especially on the internet, where you're like, oh, everyone's so accepting these days. That's just not the case. It's just not the case. We haven't moved that far in society yet, to the point where I feel like having Harry Styles in that dress on the cover of Vogue kind of breaks that echo chamber slightly, because Vogue doesn't exist inherently online. It's an outside thing. It's a real world thing. To see the backlash from that, I think, is very important for like people who do have that kind of idea that we're like so far and progressed in society that like these things don't matter anymore. It's important to like kind of understand where we still lie with this, and like where the issues, like, they're still ingrained in our society. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the people who did call out, how representative are they of the wider population?
Can I just say that this is speaking for personal experience. I think I'd wear a dress, but because I'm from Paisley, which is like impoverished area kind of in some places, I'd get fucking jumped if I wore, especially around my bit in the scheme. I'd get jumped if I wore a dress, so it's definitely representative.
Yeah.
Representative.
Yeah,
you were happy to let an actor wear a dress in that very same scheme.
That's true, but we were very early in the morning in that very music video that we were shooting. We filmed at like 5 o'clock because we didn't want anyone to, go after them. Did we not, Callum?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what's the next point on the film, Simon, that you wanted to talk about?
We've gone over the two big things I wanted to discuss with the both of you. How about we just go through the plot? Oh.
Yes, let's do that.
Go for it. Let's do controversy.
Pick up on one. This is the last one. the horse in this film.
What
I
about it?
felt so
What's
bad.
wrong with the horse?
This is
Are we gonna get hung up in veganism now? It's all right. We've done race, we've done gender. Now we're going to talk about veganism.
What's
yeah.
wrong with the horse,
Well,
Daniel?
this is a big problem I have with watching like westerns and like John Wayne films, or really any western. Seeing a horse like fall over just kind of hurts my heart a bit, because I'm like, this doesn't have to happen.
Did
But
the horse fall over?
yeah,
When?
horse falls over once in this film, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, this is just a
Are you
wider
pretty
problem.
sure? Okay, can you remember the specific scene? Because I don't remember the horse falling over.
Right. The horse is crammed into several tight locations. The horse should not be in these locations.
Okay, can I don't want to cut you off before you continue. I do agree with you. How animals are treated throughout film can be questionable at most, but these are trained animals. They just aren't just picked up at the stables. They're not contained there in long hours. There's so much legislation in protection of animals, especially like theater and like TV and film animals. Like they wouldn't
Also,
have been in
sorry, go on, Sonia.
sorry, they wouldn't have been in those conditions for a long period of time. They would have been well cared for, and they would have, the handlers would have been paid generously because they're so, because of the kind of odd kind of environment they would have been put in.
Yeah.
So any kind of like major danger that they could have been in, it would have been avoided the biggest amount possible, because insurance and everything comes into it as well, and the film company studio canal would have not wanted to pay out that insurance because it's quite a price, so they would have made sure it was well kept and everything. But I do get your point with that. It is something that I have trouble with as well when watching films with animals in distress.
Yeah.
So I have to like remind myself of these things.
Daniel, you have to remember that those sets aren't as confined as they look. They're within studios that are much larger. Those, like the walls in those, are just going to be a few screens and off camera, it's going to be a much larger space. So it's not actually in a small, tight, confined space in real life.
Yeah, I understand what you are saying. I'm not even saying that I'm right. I could be, maybe I'm just like too fucking.
No, but it's an interesting thing to bring up, because it's like, it's a horse.
The thing, I guess I just believe that they shouldn't be there. I mean, fucking horses should be running wild anyway. Have you seen the movie The Mustang that came out like a year ago?
I don't watch horse movies.
That is fucking incredible, this film. But anyway, that was just something I wanted to hear your guys' opinions on. But
yeah.
So,
okay.
Because I do get distressed about that kind of thing as well. I have to remind myself they are in perfectly good conditions and they're not being maltreated. Yeah. So
okay.
plot-wise,
is that all the issues off the table?
who knows? We might discover a few more as we go. It was a film made in the 50s.
Yep. Sid James is in this film, so.
Yes, Sid James is in this film. Another one of the Carry On cast in it as well. Yeah.
Very young, very slim.
Very, very slim. Yeah. So.
Also, just before you go in, Barbara Windsor, this is her first film role, and she must have been an extra, because I didn't.
Yeah, I think she was like very, very background, which is a shame because, Barbara Windsor. But yeah, interesting to see that. It's always interesting to see Sid James pop up and stuff. So plot-wise, what do we think? What do we think of the actual goings-on in the film?
Once the actual, I think for me, kind of at the halfway point, once the horse gets stolen, and that's when all the kind of factions come into place, and it becomes this big sort of chase to get the horse, and things start to speed up, and it started to feel like, oh, this is like a caper film. This is like, well, I hate to use this example. It's like, it's like a Guy Ritchie film. It's like a whole thing of like lots of different people. But you know what I mean? It's like I
know what you mean. I just can't stand Guy Ritchie. That's all.
Yeah, fair enough. It's like just lots of different factions and people running about trying to get in all sort of intersects and kermashes, and once that started going, that's when I got into it. But
I do think it's slow at the beginning, because you have to like kind of build up all these kind of characters and their dynamics between one another. The rest of the films in the series are kind of like quicker to enter the kind of main main meat of the plot, which is interesting.
Yeah,
The rest of the series is
it
really
never got.
interesting. Yeah.
Sorry, Simon. I was going to say it never really
No,
got too convoluted, despite the large cast.
yeah, it's easy to follow, which is good. And also, despite the large cast, it's still, it doesn't take a genius to watch it. It's good. It's consumable.
I found it
And
quite hard
it's
to root for anyone because none of the characters were really that appealing to me. Maybe if the drag
it sounds like
character,
a you problem.
yeah, maybe if the drag character wasn't in drag, then maybe if it's just a woman that played the headmistress, then it'd be like, all right, let's get this fucking school on the go. But the screaming Waynes throughout this, oh my god, what a terrible film this must be to edit, having to like put screaming Waynes in every single
Yeah,
scene.
but think of how much fun it must have been for the Waynes.
Aye, think about the Waynes, man.
Having their
Go to jail if you think about it. Sorry. That's getting edited, by the way.
They can't punish us for our thoughts.
Punish you for saying that, though. Christ's sake.
I love to think about it. You can't stop me. Joke. Not that. I'm not
Jesus
talking about
Christ,
that.
that's all getting edited out.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was I going to say? I do kind of slightly agree with what Daniel was saying. Is kind of, I feel like my allegiances lie with multiple factions, to be honest, because like you can see from their each of their perspectives. It is, it's one of those films where I feel like I can, like, not necessarily sympathize because the brother is a sleazy, sticky bastard, and the education minister is a prick, but you can, like, understand their viewpoints and everything is very clearly laid out, and there's no real antagonist per se, because it's all just, I mean, it's not as if St Trinians and the headmistress are necessarily a good facility or good people, but
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's more like that's the thing. I never really had to root for anyone in particular. I just enjoyed sitting back and watching it all.
Yeah. It's just a kind of fun romp. And it's interesting to see that in the 50s, especially with such a female-dominated film, despite the kind of sleazy representation of the older girls, which was just skin-crawling at best.
Yeah, I mean,
even though it is stated that most of them are, like, especially in the older years, are like above school age. Like one of them's married, that's mentioned. It's still slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah, some of them are old, to be fair.
Can I ask you? You said something interesting about I can't remember her character's name. The undercover female police officer.
Yeah.
She was my favorite. She was my favorite character. I felt like because she was the least mad character. So obviously
she was probably my least favorite character for that exact same reason.
Yeah,
I mean, but like I thought she wasn't too over the top, and like I quite enjoyed her the way she crept about the house. I kind of like that. But
yeah.
I mean, she's supposed to sort of represent the normal person who goes in and has to. So it's like seeing all the madness through the eyes. But yeah,
honestly, as characters go, I did find her the least appealing because she did represent that kind of like normality in the space. I also found the fact that they decided to have a relationship between her and her boss in the police force when she's the only female police officer we see, questionable at best again. It's all very dated. That was slightly tonally deaf. And how he said he promoted her after it's clearly stated they're in like some sort of physical relationship.
Your sound went there a bit.
Oh, where did I cut off?
You didn't cut off. It just kind of dipped a bit. But it's fine. We heard you.
Yeah, it's and that whole thing that added to the context of her character. I just didn't enjoy her kind of like presence in the film that much. If honestly, I would have liked to learn more about the kind of other batch of teachers because like they're all incredibly interesting and like physically interesting as well. Especially the Morticia Addams kind of character who's like very attractive.
Yeah,
we don't know much about her, but she's great. So it's interesting to see like a kind of like bigger cast of female characters, but I don't like how underdeveloped so many of them are, and the fact that one of the most developed female characters is the female police officer.
Yeah.
I suppose the reason going about the thing about them having a relationship, it's more implied than it is outright that them two are.
It's explicitly stated.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's
I
explicitly
think that's
stated.
fair.
It's like quite in your face, I'd say.
I mean, it is true to say that still to this day, most long-term relationships, it's for people who meet each other at work.
Yeah, and I respect that and understand that, but it's not about the fact that it's a workplace affair. It's the fact that he's her boss and he promoted her, when it's a stereotype that women only get to places or get in higher positions through sleeping around with the boss. That's where the issue lies. If they were on equal playing fields, I would have had no qualms at all with it, because that shit just happens. It's the fact, it's the power dynamic and the stereotypes it feeds into, which I grow issue with.
Was it stated or implied that she's in her position because of her relationship? I never got that.
It's
No,
definitely.
It wasn't.
I never got a sense of
Funny
that,
was
so
that.
maybe I just missed that.
It's definitely implied. He's like, didn't I promote you? As if
Mhm.
she owes him something for that. As if,
Well,
Yeah.
she wasn't good to get promoted enough on her own.
I mean, to be fair, that was kind of cool that they made him look like a sleazeball.
I mean, yeah, how
Like,
he's represented, he's a sleazy police officer, but it just,
and
it's the power dynamic.
competent character. In fact, she's the most competent, arguably.
I'd say she's mildly incompetent.
Speaking of which,
Who's the guy?
and I'm guessing we're not going
sorry,
plot
anyway.
by plot point anymore. It's kind of all in the air,
I can't
but
be bothered.
who cares? Yeah. When she finally escapes with the horse, not the horse that she thinks is Arab Boy. Is it Arab Boy it's called?
Yeah.
Great name.
I mean, horses always have silly names anyway. So, she had what was that thing? She got locked in the toilet, and then she had what was that? A carpet?
Yeah, it's the linoleum on the ground.
What was that all about?
Well, she was listening in to what the two people through the door were saying, and she was writing it down on the linoleum, and she was taking that as evidence.
Oh, right. Okay. Thanks for clearing that one up for me.
Absolutely no bother.
Did you raise the question of Flash Harry and we ignored it or moved on?
I didn't necessarily raise it, but I did comment on the fact that the modern adaptation cast Russell Brand as him, which was.
Why do you think that?
Because he's just this character, he's like, because he's got an estuary accent and because, he's got this kind of, he's kind of whole fatigue, he's vaguely Dickensian and he's kind of, I was and
it was in 2007 as well, so he was at his peak bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. I've never really been a fan of
do like Russell Brand, but
as an entity.
Just not in acting at all.
Or a comedian, to be honest. I thought it's just this whole shtick. It was just like saying, "Oh, I'm a bit camp, but I'm also quite outrageous, and I shag loads of women." Anybody could do what he does. Anybody could wear tight trousers and prance about.
Why don't you do it?
I could do it. I could, but I've got more dignity.
It's a lot of personal rage coming out, Callum.
It's all right.
A wee bit of jealousy coming through.
I just thought he was massively overrated. And it was also a thing of it was it was like that kind of James Corden thing where he kind of got a bit overexposed.
The difference between Russell Brand and James Corden is a massive cunt.
Is he?
Russell Brand's just a bit of a twat.
All right.
James Corden is completely intolerable. He's completely intolerable. It's been documented so many times that he's a massive dickhead as well, and he just ruins everything he's in. Cats was bad.
Oh yeah,
Cats was bad enough, but the fact he was in it is just mind-bogglingly awful. Everything he's
actually, to be honest, he is actually a talented actor.
Because in History Boys, he was really good in his role there, and even in the early Gavin and Stacey series, he's good.
Controversial.
He's good.
No, it's not controversial.
Gavin Stacey's not that bad.
No, it's not that bad. It's not the best thing, but
no, it's not. It's by no means groundbreaking, but it's entertaining.
And if you see some of his earlier roles, he was in Shane Meadows' first film, 24/7. He was also in a Mike Leigh film called All or Nothing. Yeah, which
Oh my
is not my
God.
favourite Mike Lee
His
film,
early
but
career is really interesting because
it's all,
he actually had a lot of potential as an actor, especially a theatre actor as well. When you look at James Corden roots, he was a theatre actor, which is how he got into History Boys in the first place by Alan Bennett.
yeah. It's often more
What
interesting.
happened?
It's often people's
I don't know.
career. Yeah. A lot of actors, before they become like well known, their careers are actually more interesting, because even Danny Dyer, before he started getting all these he got typecast in all these shitty gangster films. Like, if you look at I'm not
Yeah,
saying he had brilliant roles, but there was a lot more
they were
variety in his
interesting.
performance because nobody knew who he was. So we could,
Yeah.
What was
so
the
it
rave
wasn't
film he was
There's
in?
the what film?
the
Simon, did you not tell
rave
me you
film.
watched that?
Human
Yeah,
Traffic.
Yeah,
Human
Human
Traffic. That's
Traffic.
it. Yeah,
Supposed to
Yeah,
be
yeah, he
quite
was
good.
yeah,
good
he
in
was
that.
good in that. Yeah,
But
if it's like how and it's just James Corden is one of those people who will instantly bug me just on sight, and the fact he's blown up to such an extent is like sickening to me.
well,
Like, he makes me nauseous with anger, which is not a normal reaction I have to people
it's
that often.
far more severe than what I had to say about Russell Brand.
No, he makes me nauseous with anger. He grates me in a way that I didn't know was physically possible.
I really hope
Like,
that James Corden gets cast as Mr. Bean in a new film.
Why would he get cast as Mr. Bean?
Just because Simon's too big.
The idea behind that, I think I'd have to like move
It wouldn't
countries and
work.
like
He's
unlearn English. I'd
he's
have
not
to
as
unlearn
mobile.
English.
I don't think he's as mobile as Rowan Atkinson. Not as dexterous.
You know he'd try to be. You know he'd try to be. It would be awful. Oh God.
He's in a new film called Prom.
Oh
Yeah.
he's been 2 new films out just now. Like, yeah, his kind of Hollywood efforts are not looking so good.
It's so bad. It's so bad, man.
Back to the film.
Yes.
Yeah, we're completely off topic here.
Did you guys get annoyed about the Screaming Waynes?
No, I wasn't annoyed.
No. I
So,
mean,
like,
to be
they're
fair,
supposed to
I've
be like they're
watched
supposed to
this
be.
film more than I've had hot dinners at this point. Like, I did watch it a lot as a kid, so like I'm immune to it at this point.
You seen the 1981?
The train robbery one.
Blue Murder?
No, that's the second one. So there was
Blue Murder's the second one.
So is there
The
like
Great
4
Train
of them?
Robbery, or was that the 70s?
There was like, I'm pretty sure it's either the late 70s or the early 80s. They tried to reboot
I think it's the late 70s.
And I think some of the original cast even appeared in it.
Yeah, let me just look
The
it up.
Wildcats? Is that the Wildcats?
Oh, the Wildcats of St Trinain. I haven't seen that.
Well,
either way,
yeah, that looks like a. Yeah, it's directed by the same guy.
Yeah.
What you were saying earlier, Callum, about it being less of something that you want to root for, and you're just like sitting back and watching it, enjoying it.
Yeah, it's like if you see a fight and you don't know either of the people, but you're just sitting and just looking at the spectacle, and going ha 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 ha.
Yeah,
you do that.
Gladiators. It's Bride and Circuses, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like really enjoy hangout films. I enjoy mumblecore films where nothing really happens. You're just hanging out with the characters. I love mumblecore.
Speaking of which,
I've just never heard that like used to describe them.
Yeah, that's an actual. Well, I don't know if it's a term that gets used. By the way, first film we watched, I walked a few days ago. I actually walked past Peter Capaldi and his wife in Merchant City.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
Did he come up to you? Was he like, "Oh, I heard what you said"?
I said, yes, and I said, I stand by my every word. His hair was surprisingly whiter than I remember it being. I haven't watched.
Well, he's awfully old now.
Yeah, he just walked past me. And I thought, that guy looks like Peter Capaldi, and I'm like, what's Peter Capaldi?
That's actually, like when I walked past Frankie Boyle on Sucky Hall Street, and I recognised his daughter before I recognised him because we went to the same school.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, she's in the drama department, and then I was like, oh.
I actually met him and his daughter at a wedding. She was a wee girl then, but
she's a nice kid.
Frankie Boyle's daughter then.
Yeah.
But back
Yeah,
to the point I was making, by the way, I love hangout films. I didn't enjoy this because I didn't find any of the characters appealing. Okay.
because that's the thing. It's not actually the later films. The reboots are more about the students, but this is more about the
Yeah,
adults, and the students are like a force of nature. They're like the gremlins,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
basically
They're part of the
self-destruct.
architecture of the school, and the main focus is on the teachers, which is why I prefer the older films, because the newer films, it's like a kind of like ploy to get like young people into them, and it's like, oh, look at how like cool Gemma Arterton is, and I'm like, I know how cool she is. You don't have to like it's very convoluted.
Yep. Girls
But
Allowed appear in the
the
first.
oh
Yep.
but what was I saying? Yeah, the films in the rest of the series kind of like tackle more character driven plots.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is just kind of more set up to like the chaos that will ensue in this environment. And I think it does that pretty well, to be honest, as a kind of
Yeah.
base for everything else to build upon.
Speaking of which, on a technical level, I'm guessing do you think this was a low budget film, even at the time, by British standards? Because like the kind of sets were a bit wobbly in places, and I felt.
Yeah, it was by Studio Canal, which wasn't the biggest studio production at the time. And also, I think partly the set design, kind of a la Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban with the Shrieking Shack, is supposed to seem sugary and kind of like displaced, as if like it in itself it was sentient, but also it was probably just slightly low budget. But I do think there was a point to it being kind of like more in motion in a way.
Yeah, because
You know.
for films that, it's a film that largely relies on sight gags, and I was just thinking that
Yeah.
films from that era are a bit older in terms of the technical level. Like, I thought some of the stuff, the way it was filmed, it was like quite simplistic and not always necessarily in a good way. Like I did enjoy the hockey sequence. In fact, I've seen the same scene from the original film, and I prefer not the original film, from the 2007 film, and I prefer this one much more. I kind of like how they don't actually show what happens on the field and they just describe it.
Yeah,
kind of worked.
It's more like the implication of it all, which is kind of more enjoyable if you're going to do something that like to that level of comedic violence. In the newer film, how they portray it, it's like it's very glossy and shiny, and it doesn't quite give off the correct energy, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, the comedic value of showing the reactions instead of the action most of the time works so well. It's why something like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's why I like that, because the reactions the characters used to.
Because you can kind of like, it's the kind of use of suspense and like using your own imagination to like wonder how like ridiculous it could be, which is always good. Yeah. Does anyone have anything else to say
about the not showing stuff? Like I'm pretty sure Hitchcock does that. I can't remember the film, but now there's that rape scene on the boat, and he, instead of showing the rape, he like pans away to the window. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What film?
No, but then I also didn't think I was going to be talking about rape in a St Trinian's review. So
yeah, neither.
All right.
For what's essentially a kids' film, this has not been a very light-hearted. It's not been a terribly light-hearted podcast.
Well, I'm sure being a child in the 50s wasn't necessarily very light-hearted either. So
we saved that for the Christmas special, guys.
Yeah, exactly. When we watch
we're going to watch Irreversible.
You guys like that film?
I haven't seen it, and to be honest, those kind of films, like the kind of film that I don't know if it really appeals to me anymore. Like if I can be
really
bothered. Good. Yeah, like I don't know if I don't even want to talk about it. Like let's talk about this film. We talk too much about other films when we talk about music. We talk about the music for a bit.
Yeah.
Can I just say real quick, I absolutely adore the music in this film. It's a real point of nostalgia for me. I've got part of the soundtrack saved in my playlist, like my playlist on Spotify. The main theme for the St Trinian thing is like one of my favorite piano pieces. And the Flash Harry little jingle is also, it's like a huge point of nostalgia for me. Like even like in terms of like actual like content and like quality, I know they're not the best, but like for me personally, it's like it brings like insane amount of joy. So I thought I'd just say that.
Cool. And I realise nostalgia is a powerful thing.
It sure is.
I found Flash Harry's theme, because it was used several times, quite a bit grating, because it used the xylophone. In fact, throughout the film, the xylophones are used quite a lot. And yeah, I wasn't a fan. Like, you know, he has that walking theme because he has that funny walk he does. So I realised, like, I realised that's the point. This is meant to be like a live action cartoon. So
yeah, because it's based on the cartoons. So.
Exactly, it's based on a comic strip, like similar to. In fact, were they just paintings? Basically, were they just drawings? There was like no bubbles or captions. They were just drawings.
No, they were just sketches in the Beano, I think, originally. I've ordered I've ordered a book of them.
All right, I didn't know it was that. That's kind of like the origins of the Addams Family. They're just like these sketches. There's no really any plot or anything behind them. They're just funny drawings.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I didn't have a problem with most of it. Like, yeah, just Flash Harry's theme. I think it's because it just got used so often, and like I said, the xylophones were a bit. Yeah, it just didn't really do it for me.
You're not a fan of the xylophone?
No. It just, I don't know. It just made it sound a bit cheap. Like, and I kind of like it made the kind of sort of low budget of the film sort of a bit more obvious. You know, it's like when you watch it. It's like when you watch a B movie from the 80s and it's just all synths. It's all just everybody's using synths because they were cheap. And I like it. It's just, you know what I mean.
Synths are great, man.
Yeah, I don't think I've got anything else to say on the music.
You don't like xylophones. You don't like synths. What's that instrument?
I didn't say I didn't like xylophones or synths. I just didn't say I didn't like. It's just that my point is by that era, synths were just, they became ubiquitous and cheap. So everyone and their granny had a xylophone. So it was like a cheap way to score a film. But I'm just saying the use of xylophone in this film, I wasn't just a fan of it. I found it a bit too grating.
Yeah, I don't think we actually talked about what's his name, Flash Harry, like
Flash Harry.
Flash Harry. We talked about him in Russell Brand, but we didn't talk about like we kind of got segued away for that. But I thought like his performance was pretty funny, pretty cartoony.
Yeah.
Apart from his dialogue, that was shite.
I mean, like, yeah, I mean, it is of its time, and like I said, it's very cartoony, and so it's not the kind of humor that we've been brought up with. So it might seem very simplistic to us, but you know, I just got to appreciate it. I just, it was fine. It was all right. Like, there wasn't really any laugh out loud moments for me, but in terms of the lines, I was a bit surprised to hear the word orgy at one point. I thought that would in a film, but there you go. Maybe it didn't really have the.
I mean, there were quite a few suggestive scenes in it, so.
Yeah.
The orgy is a word that doesn't explicitly sex.
No,
is it? I mean, you can use
but
that.
She says it's practically an orgy with the French lunch, the French bit sort of. The implication, you know.
Did you guys actually laugh?
I laughed at some of the sight gags.
Yeah, at times.
I laughed at the bit where they used the bed as the battering ram and there's a wee girl sat on it shouting orders. Like, I quite liked the bit. Laughed at some of the sight gags with the wee girls, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And
I did not.
No shit.
Yeah.
What a bummer. I'm such a fucking negative person, God.
Negative Nancy.
Yeah. Well, it's Christmas. We should. It's a season of goodwill and all that. I'm talking shit, guys. I'm talking shit. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what's going on anymore.
What was that? What? Okay, this is clearly winding down.
No, it's not.
Is there anything? You two look half asleep at this point.
Just not
What's
had
a
my dinner.
3-hour special?
No one's had their dinner. It's 7:15.
Speaking of,
I've nothing else to say on this.
Neither. I think I've stated most of
Callum, you got any
Points.
final points?
oh, have I got final points? Don't really know. Be interesting to see. I'd be kind of interested to see the sequels. I would get the impression.
They're
I
all
actually
on
caught.
iPlayer.
Yeah, they're all on iPlayer. Like I would actually started watching a Blue Murder in St Trinain's. I get the sense
Which
that
is one of my favourites.
I get the sense that the sequels aren't as anarchic as the first one.
How do you mean by that?
Like, you know, the sort of chaos and the, like, you know, the kind of the chaoticness of it all. Like, you know, the girls running about acting like basically gremlins.
Yeah. All
I
right.
guess
Yeah,
it's
it's
not.
slightly toned down.
Yeah. And I get is like the kind of main characters like Flash Harry and Miss what's her name? Miss Fritten? Are they the
Yes.
are they the only recurring ones?
Well, there's a few occurring faces, and the the teachers are all pretty much the same, I believe. So yeah.
I think I've got anything to add. One thing I noticed, and this is just a really not like, you know, Sid James was actually South African in his origins,
Yeah.
and I think his accent slips a few times, and you actually can see there's more South African inflection. Like, just a thing I observed. But
Interesting.
yeah. Well,
Cool.
yeah,
Is that it?
that's it.
Fantastic. Well, this has been it for this week of Sticky Floor Podcast, where we have discussed the 1954 film St Trinians. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye and good night from Simon, Callum, and Daniel.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Jesus Christ.